Greetings, guys, gals, non-binary pals, and welcome back to another video. Someone you have seen me and many other creators talk about over the years is Girl Defined. If you somehow do not know who Girl Defined are, basically they are two sisters who are very Christian and they make content surrounding that, but specifically femininity and purity culture. The thing they were the most well known for was that they are the two that saved their first kiss for marriage. And upon making that statement in that video, everything kind of went from there. People jumped on, people have kept up with them, people have talked about them. They've released books. I have read a couple of their books and I've made videos about their books. But it's been a while since I have checked in with them and sort of seen what's been going on. And I found out some news about them, or at least about Bethany. Now, I am several months late to this, and I did not even happen upon this myself. I got a text from Kat while I was at the gym the other day being like, oh my god, I have news about Girl Defined. And I was like, oh my god, I need to make a video about this. So that's what we're doing today. But before we get into it, I would like to say a massive thank you to today's patron of the day, Mr. Noodle. I appreciate you and your support so much, and thank you so much for joining. If anyone else would like to go on Patreon, go to patreon.com/savvycat or click the top link in the description. It starts at as little as £1 a month, and I appreciate it greatly. Okay, so basically, the massive news that I heard that made me be like, hold up, sorry, pardon? Is that Bethany's husband, Dave, is deconstructing. He has left the church. He is no longer a Christian. And that is massive. Like, that is a very big deal, right? Like, we all saw how strict they were in this, right? We've all seen how they've talked about it. I've read a couple of their books. I know that, like, their faith means everything to them. Like, they ripped into people who left the church. They are so strong in their Christianity and their values to the point where they've, like, put themselves in a bubble and wouldn't talk to anyone outside of it. And now Dave has left the church, and that has him and Bethany obviously having a lot of conversations, and Bethany is also opening up a lot, and a lot of her views about a lot of things have changed and are changing. And I think that it is very worth talking about. And so I'm going to try give you sort of the rundown on what's been going on and sort of catch up with where we're at. My absolute favorite thing about this entire thing is where this started, which is, it's so funny. Basically, Paul and Morgan, whom I love the amount of lore that is required for this. Paul and Morgan are a Christian couple who make YouTube videos also about their faith. I've also made a video about them a while back, and they started a series of like 24 hours where they spend 24 hours with different Christian YouTubers, and they did 24 hours with Bethany and Dave, and it is an incredibly long video. It is an hour long, and most of it was so boring, but it was this video here and the conversations that happened in it that then inspired Dave to make the final step to leaving the church. And that is so funny. Like, that is ridiculously funny. Like, one of the first conversations that take place in this video is Paul and Dave having a chat in the car where Dave swears and Paul is like, oh my god, you curse? That's not very Christian of you. And Dave basically is like, it doesn't actually say anything about that in the Bible. I think that there's, you know, I've become a bit more lenient and open about things because I realized that people take Bible passages and just change it to how they think it applies. Basically saying, you know, Christians cherry pick and are too harsh and close-minded. And he doesn't vibe with that. And he's kind of expanding out his worldview and he doesn't want to read the Bible like that. And Paul just goes, well, don't be so open-minded your brain falls out.
Hey, Dave, it's the cussing, man. Like, why are you cussing? And then I maybe would quote a Bible verse like, let no unwholesome talk come out of your mouth.
Okay. When someone says, well, what does the Bible say? I typically will hear a certain type of what I would call biblicism underlying that, a theory of the Bible that often we just take as self-evidently true. This is what the Bible is.
You're a deep guy. Have you ever, you're familiar with the expression, don't be so open-minded that your brain falls out?
Okay, bro. Okay. It, to me, like, must have set off something in Dave's brain. And that's right at the start of the video as well. We'll talk a little bit more about the things that happen in the video as we go on. But that's where this started. Basically, that whole hour-long, 24 hours in a day with Paul Morgan, Bethany, and Dave, that went up. And then a few days later, Bethany and Dave released a video on their channel that was just them sitting down and having a very real, raw talk about their values, where they stand, and how Dave is deconstructing and leaving the church. He is no longer a Christian. Bethany is, but she is also growing and changing as time moves. I'm so sorry and I'm so upset by this, but that video no longer exists. In fact, their entire channel is gone and I couldn't find it re-uploaded anywhere. There's a few people who have talked about it before, but they've kind of, you know, like clipped it and they've got themselves over it. So I didn't go through and try to find anything. So we don't have that video. I haven't watched that video. I don't know what was said in that video. And that's incredibly annoying because I've heard that it is a very good video. But, you know, they obviously received a lot of backlash from a lot of Christians who were there following, who do not care for this, and now their entire channel is gone. However, there is a podcast episode that I watched, and that is what I will be referring to, and that is where we are going to be getting all of our information from today. The podcast that I watched and that we are going to be talking about is called Bethany Beal on Girl-Defined God and the Gays, and it is hosted by Zelf on the Shelf. That is the name of the channel, and it is two best friends who are ex-Mormons. One of them is queer and non-binary. The other, I'm not sure if she is queer, doesn't particularly matter. But anyway, they make content that isn't unsimilar to mine, where they, you know, react to conservatives and have conversations about it. And then obviously they have a podcast, and they brought these two onto it and had this conversation. They asked a lot of questions. They got into a lot of shit. And it was a very good podcast. I will link it down below if anyone wanted to watch the whole thing. There is also a part 2, but I had enough to say about this part 1, so we're just talking about this one today. Yeah, during this podcast, they discussed a great number of things, and they answered a bunch of questions that I have and that I'm sure a bunch of you also have. But one of the things that grabbed my attention the most, they found the most interesting, was how Bethany spoke about Girl-Defined's core and the morals that they had when they started their channel versus now. And especially when it comes to purity culture. So she revealed that she is quite embarrassed about some of the stuff that her and Kristen released in the past. And in the video they did with Paul and Morgan, they also admitted to being a bit embarrassed about some of the stuff they did in the past and the extreme takes they had on modesty in particular, with now a bunch of their old blog posts are deleted. They don't exist anymore, such as like, should a woman show her collarbones? Those are all deleted. They don't exist anymore. And Bethany in particular says that she's quite embarrassed about those because she is embarrassed by how much they centered their beliefs around that. And I find that so interesting.
For sure, I have like zero interest in digging into the nitty gritty of like that blog post we just talked about, like the cleavage. Just like, why? Like I don't.
She admitted to basically that, you know, these points and saying these things, it wasn't something that she ever cared about as much as it comes across. She knew it was important and that, you know, she wanted to live under God's design and what femininity was, and that meant being modest, and she had it these really strict rules and made that like the core of their identity, and that this very strict set of rules for modesty was the only way to go, otherwise you were going against God. And she didn't even entirely believe that. She didn't even think that was 100% true, to the point where she would be wearing her like clothes that she would normally wear, and then they would go to take a photo to post on Instagram, and she would go and change her clothes because what she was currently wearing didn't fit the ideas that she was promoting online and in her books.
But being more like actually posting those pictures to Instagram and posting what I actually wear like in real life, rather than just being like, oh, well, this wouldn't be a good picture to share because people might look like, be like, wait, Bethany wears that, and being like, that doesn't like, it's so freeing to be like, no, this is actually what I actually wear.
Which is, girl. So just doing harm for the sake of doing harm without even believing it with your chest. And a lot of these things they brought up and a lot of the video content that they were doing, she also admitted to really a lot of the time what went into it was being controversial. It was trying to make videos that got attention, that people would make videos about and talk about. It was controversial stuff because they liked getting the attention and the views, etc.
Neither of us have an interest now in kind of like, oh, let's try to intentionally create controversial content to like get, make it go viral in that way. We're just, I don't know, sometimes you just grow older and maybe more settled in life, and you're like, I don't really care in that way to like gain attention or traction through that.
I understand, obviously, if this is your job, you want to get the views, but it's just so funny because that goes so against everything that they stand for. Like the not being greedy, the wanting to just say shit to get attention goes so against all the values that they put out there as well. So it's all just one big hypocritical contradiction is really what Girl Defined was about. But she acknowledged that, a lot of the takes were so extreme and they did center them so heavily around themselves because they were told that, you have to have these really strong black and white beliefs. That's the only way you could really go. So although she didn't believe it with her chest, she was promoting it for acceptance from within her own community. And she said in this podcast how frustrating it is that so many Christians are so black and white.
And it's like, we were never trying to be like the modesty people, but it's like, it was just, and I get it, like Christians want very black and white like guidelines and rules, and it's like, I want that too. And so when we just started talking about modesty, it just like kind of blew up and became like such a hot topic that we ended up talking about it more. But it's like that stuff like that, like I don't really think that's the essence and the heart of at all what I want to be focusing on.
So by changing up and becoming more in the middle, she realized that that would mean losing a lot of those people and losing a lot of that audience. And she wanted to continue to be accepted by fellow Christians, but she also, as time went on and they grew, realized that it didn't actually matter that much. I keep changing between she and they. This interview is with Bethany, so I keep saying she, but Girl Defined is both of them, so I say they sometimes. So I'm sorry if that's confusing at all. Bethany does only use she, her pronouns. I'm not referring to Bethany as they. I'm just switching between Bethany and Girl Defined. But as they got more comfortable and they got older and settled, they stopped caring so much about how other people perceived them and just started doing what made them feel happy and comfortable, which was more of a neutral point. It's still modesty and purity culture, but it is not as extreme as it was. And in the video they did with Paul and Morgan, they stated that, it never said anywhere in the Bible specifically what modesty actually looked like. It said that modesty was important, but it didn't lay out what modesty meant.
We were painting very black lines in scripture of like, modesty is this, it isn't this, and drawing these lines and these boundaries and saying this is what's biblical and this is what isn't. And we've come to realize the scripture doesn't actually draw those lines that we were drawing. It talks about modesty and women should care about it, but not in the ways that we were drawing lines. Like our version of modesty wasn't 100% biblical, I guess. So coming to terms of just realizing like our perspective was our opinion, but not biblical truth. And we've even changed in some of our opinions of what we believe about modesty and our views on just, I don't know, like what.
So they realized that what they were promoting was what they were taught was biblical, but isn't actually biblical. It doesn't actually hold any ground in the Bible, which I think is very, very interesting. And it makes a lot of sense, really, of like, it does represent that whole cycle of like, you were taught that this is what it is, and you never think to do your own research. You're like, well, I was grown up, told this is what was in the Bible, and this is how this is translated, and this is what that means. So that's how I think everyone else should live. That's how I'm going to live. And then growing and reading and learning and being like, it doesn't actually say that. So as I said, a year or so ago, I think honestly probably closer to 2 years ago now, oh my God, I read one of their books. And in it, it said that making friends outside of the church it's the end of it all. You should absolutely not do that. It was talking a lot about how so much of the people they grew up with left the church. It was talking about how girls they went to school with, they went off to university, and then suddenly they were going to parties. They were moving in with their boyfriends. They were straying from the church, or they weren't following Christianity properly. They weren't dressing modestly. They'd changed a lot, and they'd opened their worldview. And they were talking about this like it was the worst thing ever. Effectively saying that, you know, you shouldn't interact with people outside of your community and outside of your church because it's going to lead you to sin. All these people that went away left the church. And so anything outside of that is obviously tempting you into sinning. And at the time, you know, obviously when we hear people say this, we always have this conversation that's very much like, I mean, yes, that is true in the sense that like, if you are only ever surrounded by people who share the same views as you, you are never going to expand that. You are never going to learn more. If you never meet a gay person and you've been told your entire life that being gay is evil and bad and every gay person is bad, and you've never actually met one, you're obviously going to believe that, and then you're going to project that and be homophobic because you've never seen a gay person. You've never seen how their lives are impacted. You've never seen how they live. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if you are surrounded by homophobia, you are going to be homophobic. You then step out and you go and are around queer people and you see queer people and you make friends with queer people. Suddenly you're like, I don't understand why everyone's so homophobic. This is just another person living their life. You know, it's not you're tempted into sinning. It's that you have more world experience. You learn more. You learn to love more people. You learn to accept things, and you learn the world is bigger than yourself. And so I find it really interesting, and also I'm very glad about this, that here in this podcast, Bethany is saying that she is making friends outside of her circle. She is saying that she really wants to expand the people that she's talking to and expand the people that she is friends with.
What is the core of what I believe, and why is there this almost like pressure to kind of like stay in my bubble, and why do I want to stay in my bubble, and what am I afraid of, you know? Mm-hmm. So this has been definitely challenging for me because the truth is I am around a lot of people who think just like me, you know, well, then I'm married to someone who's not. But in general, you know, and that's not something that I want to necessarily be true for the future.
Obviously, she is now in an interfaith marriage. Her husband is not a Christian. So even that in itself is expanding outside of that bubble. Where a few years ago, she basically was like, I don't want to be friends with anyone who isn't Christian. Now she's found herself married to an atheist. And because of that, she has realized that it allows her to have more conversations, and she wants to talk to more people and expand her worldview and open her arms and her heart to more people, which is great. This is one thing I'm really curious about, because this podcast was a couple months ago as well. So I'm a bit late on everything, and I'm curious to know if anything has changed since this sort of time, because I find it really fascinating because in their books, especially the one about God's design for femininity, they are so close to so many issues, and it's so frustrating. I made a video about this if you want to hear me talk a little bit more in depth about it. But basically, like, they have the idea of like a feminist point, but then go the complete wrong way to fix it. Like, they'll have a thought about sexualization of women, and it's the exact same thought I have. We think the exact same thing, being like, people overly sexualize women. People expect this of women. But I go and say, men have done this, and we need to solve this problem. And they would flip and be like, women are the problem. And it's interesting to see her sort of coming back to more this middle line and acknowledging that these problems exist, but not directly putting the blame in the wrong place. And I'm curious to know, as time moves and the more people she talks to and the more conversation she has even with Dave, her husband, what changes in that regard. Because a lot has been changing in the way that she views so many things. Like, she originally viewed religion and her core around just biblical truth and wanting to live in these very strict boxes of what it meant to be a woman. She wanted to live this like godly, biblically defined life that she was told she was biblical and what she was meant to do, and that she never questioned until she started realizing that these boxes weren't really making her happy. They were too restrictive, and she didn't actually agree with all the stuff that was being enforced, and it didn't make her happy. And as she's talked to Dave, and as she has continued to live and learn and talk to other people, she has now come to the conclusion and the place where, to her, her faith and her Christianity means love. Above all else, it is about love.
I think growing up, especially like through the end of high school, I felt a lot of pressure to like perform certain specific Christian duties that proved you had the kind of right relationship with God. So you had to read your Bible this much, you had to do all these things. And honestly, kind of like when I got married to Dave, I really didn't like that. And I was like, I don't want to have this like rigid check the boxes kind of relationship with God. Like, I feel more of a genuine relationship with Christ and less of this like performance based than I ever have before. And again, like, this is what I want to pass on to my kids.
And it is about her loving Jesus and him loving her, and her just loving people and wanting to share that love and thinking everyone deserves to be loved. And it doesn't matter about really anything else. And that is such an immense change of place from where she was. And she loves this much more because she thinks that this is a better way to raise her kids, because growing up in the very rigid, strict lines that she did obviously caused her a lot of pain and was really difficult and made her life harder to enjoy. And she is happy that she is married to Dave and someone who is able to have more of an open mind and have these conversations, whom she claims, even as he is deconstructed, has made her a better Christian because it makes her look at her own values and question, like, does this make you happy? Is this a place of love? Like, stuff like that.
He helps me to be a better Christian, you know, a better Christian. Like, that's the weird part about it. Like, he's not trying to deconvert me. He's sharing what he believes and what he thinks, but I'm, you know, still holding on to my faith, and I want to at this point. So he's like, well, let me help you be the best Christian that you can.
So they work really well as a pair, and she's excited to raise her kids in this environment where they just know they are loved and to do what makes them happy and feel fulfilled. And this is where we get into brilliant territory that made me so happy, is that this does indeed extend into, she said that if her kid ever came home one day and said that they were gay, that would be fine. I think she used Davy, I think is her son's name, as an example, saying that if he came home one day and said he was gay, that's fine. He is still welcome. He can bring his partner over. He can, as long as he is happy and he is loved and knows that he is loved, that is all that matters.
Just like if Davy grew up and he were like, I'm gay. It's like, literally to me, I'm not gonna, you know, I'm like, I love you. Come in my home. Come, you know, bring your person with you. Like, I will love you and have open arms, just like I hope you would do for me.
She said that she still doesn't understand being gay. She said that what she wants is for people to live their best life and to be fulfilled. And she does believe in God's design. And to her, God's design is a man and a woman because they can reproduce. And so that will bring them the most fulfillment. So she doesn't quite like it because she doesn't think that is fulfilling you as well as you could be fulfilled. However, she doesn't think there should be any repercussions for it at all. She still thinks you deserve to be able to get married, to have full rights, to be able to love in public, to have a loving family, and not face any discrimination or anything at all.
I wouldn't want any belief, any orientation, anything to ever interfere with the way that I care for someone, love someone, welcome them into my home. My heart truly is that I want people to like thrive and have the most meaningful, well-loved life possible. And like for me as a Christian particularly, like I still at this point like believe for me personally that God had a specific design with that, but it's like it doesn't, I believe that because I think that that is the answer to the most flourishing life possible. I don't force that on anyone or think that you have to do that. You know, it's just a belief that I hold, but I don't want less happiness. I don't want like, oh, well, then you shouldn't be with that person. It's like, this is what I believe because I think this will make everyone like the most fulfilled. But if you choose something different, that doesn't change my perspective, my value, my love toward that person at all.
Which is massive, considering in the book that I read of theirs, there is a whole part about them referring to people they know suffering from lesbianism and how they have to overcome that, and how, like, talking about it like it's a disease and how you can't act on that. It's a disease that you need to be cured from because it's not God's design. Referring to being queer as like a disease and as a sin and something you need to be healed from because it's not God's design, to turning around and being like, I think that everyone deserves the same legal rights. I will welcome queer people into my home with my arms open. I will love and accept my child no matter what. And saying that, you know, she thinks that people who disown their kids for being queer are absolutely just horrible people, and no parent should ever do that. All kids deserve to be loved no matter what, is phenomenal.
For Christians who are like, oh, well then like trying to make all these rules in place, or trying to like really genuinely not having open arms, or like Christian parents who literally like don't, you know, love their children. Like, I think that's horrible, and I don't agree with any of that.
It should be bare minimum, but considering where we were at before, and not even that long ago, that is such a massive flip. And it's just like such a hopeful thing, you know, to see these people who were so strict in their very black and white conservative Christian box move to this place where she fully is just like, I had it wrong. This is just about love. I think everyone deserves to be loved and deserves to be happy, and we shouldn't judge each other. That's incredible. And Dave's views on this have obviously helped a lot because they have conversations about this. And I don't know where Bethany's line is or whatever, but Dave straight up was just like, if you're a consenting adult, you can do what you want. You can have multiple partners. Your gender expression can be what you want. You can date who you want. You can have sex with who you want. Do whatever you want. If you're an adult, make your own choices. It's got nothing to do with me.
I don't share the same assumptions right now. And I'm not saying that I have landed, but I'm a lot more comfortable to celebrate people's, you know, what they identify as, how they choose to think about gender, how they choose to think about their own sexuality. My emotional propensity or my emotional preference is just acceptance. You do you, don't harm other people, consenting adults, that sort of thing. Man and man, many men, many women together. It's like, whatever. Like,
again, this is the man who saved his first kiss till marriage. It's just not a place you expect to end up. It just shows, you know, that like, having conversations and talking to people, as difficult as it can be, having conversations with people who disagree with you, sometimes it really does pay off and it does make a difference. We went from a place where potentially if their kid came out as gay, they would not feel comfortable coming out. They would potentially not be safe coming out. I don't know where the line would have been. Conversion therapy could have happened. Like, I don't know. But now we're at a place with them where they would fully accept their child coming out as queer. And that, I think, is an incredible, incredible improvement. Obviously, regardless of these massive shifts in beliefs on like queer rights and oppression, etc., at the end of the day, Dave is still a cis-het white man with a very strict Christian background. So he has an understanding of where bigots come from to the point where he empathizes with them greatly. Like, I don't expect him to be out here at pride parades being like, yay, queer rights. Like, that's not something I expect from him ever. He is obviously still likely a conservative voter, at the very least a centrist. I bring this up just because there was a really interesting conversation they had when asked about it, where basically he was saying that he understands where like homophobic people who don't think gay people deserve the right to get married come from, in the sense that, you know, Bethany's values are, she doesn't want people to cause harm. She doesn't want people to harm themselves. And his values are saying, you know, consenting adults can do what they want as long as they don't hurt people, as long as they aren't causing harm. So he was like, but everyone's idea of harm is different. So the people who are preventing queer rights from happening are people who think that being queer is doing harm. So therefore, I can't really tell them they don't have a place to do that.
I understand in a lot of cases why many well-meaning Christians throughout church history have held those beliefs and assumptions and conclusions that follow from those assumptions. The harm principle goes something like, you should be free to do whatever you want as long as you don't bring harm upon another person. The problem is that harm is going to be defined differently by plenty of people depending on what you think human nature is. I'm very much in process as to how to build a coherent and rigorous ethical framework, especially in a pluralistic society where you've got competing moral and ethical frameworks. Harm is complicated depending on the person talking about it, the discourse. And so I have a lot of grace for people having different conclusions based on their different assumptions of what the purpose of human life is.
Which is obviously a very frustrating stance for people to take. I do think it's interesting how that seems to be where a lot of centrist sort of views come from. I just find it a really interesting sort of take of being like, you know, like, do what you want as long as you aren't hurting everyone. But then, yeah, you do think about it and people are like, but I do think that's hurting people. And the way to get past that is having conversations like this is happening. But people aren't willing to have conversations. And he acknowledged, he's like, I don't think people want people to be oppressed. I don't know anyone who says, I want to oppress these people. But it doesn't change the fact that oppression is happening.
Very few people I know of in society would say, I want people oppressed. But there is oppression. Yeah. I think we can agree. Yeah. So that's the complication we're living with.
To that, I do disagree. I think people do want to oppress people. And maybe Dave, when he was in this place and was homophobic and actively didn't want, you know, gay people to get married because they were doing harm, maybe that wasn't him actively being like, I think these people should be oppressed. It was more just like, these people are harming themselves and harming other people. But people in power definitely do want to oppress people because it means that they uphold their spot at the top. Like, they do like to oppress people. They won't openly admit that, but that is what they want to do. And that is why this is happening. And that is even why you are learning that it is harmful. It comes from people who want to actively oppress people because it means that they are better off. And I'm glad that, you know, this was sort of realized in a sense of realizing that oppression was occurring and he didn't want to be a part of the oppression anymore. And he said, do I think oppression is good? No. Do I think it should continue to happen? No. However, it's not my place to stop it. To which I say, it kind of actually is. That's what your vote is for. We're in a place where I'm glad that, you know, they love and accept people. I don't expect them to come out and be like leftists or fucking feminists and pride goers or whatever, but I'm glad we're at least at a place where they are not promoting anything harmful and we are moving towards something that is positive. This led into a very long conversation where Bethany asked Tanner, who is the queer NB part of this duo, what they want from Christians, like what people who were in her position before or her position now, what they should know from a queer person. Like, what should they know? And I won't go into that. We are all queer people here. We sort of know. It was just sort of about visibility and being seen as a person and just wanting to have a conversation and be viewed as just a person who loves people.
So I'm just curious specifically from you, Tanner, people like me, people that are maybe even more extreme than me, like what, for your voice right now, like what would you want them to know? Like you're saying, let's have those conversations, let's talk about it. Like as a queer person and like that wrestling, like this is what I want you to know about like me. And this is what I want to share because I think like I can benefit from that. And I know the whole group of people that are coming for the first time, I think it could be really helpful.
Well, I think most of us have a desire to be like witnessed, like deeply witnessed for who we are and for how we see ourselves and not just to have like things projected onto us.
And it was quite a good conversation and thing that he said. Obviously, don't need to go into it. We're all on the same page. But again, the podcast will be linked in the description if you would like to go listen to it for yourself. But Bethany said that, you know, she is willing to keep an open mind and she wants to continue to learn and expand. And she doesn't know where she's going to be in a month, 2 months, a year, 2 years. Like she doesn't know where she's going to be and what her beliefs are because she doesn't exist inside a box anymore. She's opened herself up to learning more and to growing.
This year's the first year I've ever like really even come face to face with the idea of like, oh, you know, like there may come a day And like, who knows, in the future, it could be even like the near future where like Girl Defined either has a drastic change or kind of like comes to the end of its existence as it's been known. Not that there's a plan for that, but like there just may be like a new season. Life has changed, thoughts have changed, or just like the timing has changed.
And I found this incredibly interesting from her, and this goes back to Paul and Morgan and the bit they did with them, in which, you know, she is opening her mind a bit and she is expanding out her reach and the people that are in her life and the things that she believes and she cares about, and she is realizing that Christianity and her faith is all about love, and that is what she values in life. And I'm sitting here making this video praising that because I think it's great, and I think it's great to see people who are moving into this. I especially think that it's great when people who are an influence to other Christians, like especially young Christian girls who are looking to them, are now able to see that, you know, the boxes, they aren't real, and I hope that they are able to be inspired by this transition as well. I find it interesting the narrative gets spun like about the left and like about feminists and stuff, because when talking about this with Paul and Morgan specifically, she'd already started being a little bit more open-minded before all of this went down. Like over the past couple years, they sort of mellowed out a little bit, and she was saying that, you know, a lot of people are now claiming that she's a feminist and moving on to our side. And she's like, I don't know why people believe that. I'm still a Christian. I still live under Christ and under God, and I still am a very strongly devout Christian. I don't know why people keep saying that I'm becoming a feminist.
People have specifically accused me of being like, oh, you're really becoming, you know, more of a feminist and stuff. Like, oh, Bethany, she's taking steps, she's almost there. And I always crack up because I'm like, what? Like, I am still like an extremely passionate like Christian. Like everything I do is like coming from an extremely passionate Christian view. Like,
and I find that so funny because it shows so much how this narrative that does not exist has been like spun of like, you cannot be a leftist and Christian. You cannot be a feminist and Christian, when that is just not even a little bit true. Bethany, as you know, your morals and your views and the way that you value and view yourself as a Christian and your connection with God can change. It can adapt as you grow and your worldview grows. So does your relationship with God. And you can be a feminist and a Christian. Both of those things can happen at the same time. Leftists are not here being like, you have to leave the church. You have to deconstruct. Otherwise, you are just a stupid little girl. Like, no one's saying that. I personally don't understand religion. It's not something that is for me. But I respect people who have religions when they are using it for themselves and it makes themselves feel better. And you having a connection with God and being a devout Christian is entirely your prerogative. You are more than welcome to do that. I'm happy for you to have a faith. That doesn't matter to me. I'm not praising you for stepping away from God. I don't care about your relationship with God. Like, you can love God more than anything in the entire world. I do not care. That doesn't take away from the fact that you are making less harmful claims. You are teaching less harmful things. You are coming to a more neutral point where you are no longer actively harming people. And I'm praising you for that. I don't think you're a feminist. I think that, interestingly, you have a lot of values that would line up to feminism if you took a moment. And I'm interested to see where you may be and what your values might be in a couple of years, because after reading your books and the way that you view femininity and modesty and everything, like, it's so on the, it's like, you know how left and right is like, it's a circle. It's like, you're so far left, you're right. She's like almost so far right, she's left. The circle is like touching and she just needs to step over the other side because she went from this extreme as opposed to this, you know? So I'm interested to know once she talks to people and learns more if she does change that and she decides, oh, maybe I actually am a feminist. I'm just a Christian feminist. But we're not at that point yet. And I don't know if we ever will be. And that's okay. I don't think everyone needs to be an advocate for everything. You can just exist. You can just be a Christian. You know, like, it's fine. You don't have to make all your content like promoting feminism or like pulling down purity culture or whatever. No one expects that of you. The praise you're getting, at least from me, is not praise that you are leaving the church. It is not praise that you are finally stepping away and you're a feminist now and it's wonderful to have you on our side. I do not think you are on my side. I do not think that you are with me. I just think you are less against me. I think that you are neutral with me. You know, I don't think that you are going, like, that you are actively wishing for harm to be upon me. And I know that before, you didn't think that's what you were doing. You didn't think you were promoting harm. You didn't think you were pushing things that were actively harming people. But you were. And now you're saying you regret that, or at least you don't want to do that anymore. And I think that that is a good step, just in terms of being a good person. I think you were a bad person, and now you are a less bad person, you know? Like, it's growth is growth. She kept saying, like, people keep saying I'm making progress. Like, progress towards what? What am I progressing towards? And it's like, the progress is progress to acceptance. Being a decent person, like, believing that we are all equal and we don't have to change or conform, you know? It's about, you've made progress to making your kid feel like they are accepted no matter what. This whole podcast closes with her talking about her relationship with God, where she said she felt like her entire life she was put into a box, and getting married taught her that she didn't want to be there anymore. I'm really glad that she has allowed herself to step outside that box and to make these decisions and to allow herself to grow and to give herself some freedom. To make progress towards acceptance, even if she doesn't really understand what she's talking about when she talks about that. In saying all of this, as I think I kind of just specified, but I would like to specify again, I am not saying that, you know, even if she did decide to identify as a feminist, even if in time she moved more and decided she actually aligned more with, like, my values, I don't think you have to forgive her. This is the thing, like, nothing she can do can take away from the harm that she has caused. I don't think that she necessarily deserves forgiveness from people, especially people who she has actively had a hand in causing harm to. Especially when she didn't even believe all the harmful things she was saying. Like, she's pushing a harmful rhetoric when she didn't even 100% believe it just because it benefited her. And I think especially that, like, it doesn't necessarily deserve forgiveness. I don't think you have to forgive her and, like, welcome her into your space or anything if it ever came down to that decision being made. I do understand that the church grooms you and these things happen because of the way that you were raised. And as we said, like, when you were raised in this bubble, you can't really reach outside of it. You don't really learn. There's nothing to teach you. And it is incredibly hard to step out of that. And it's obviously taken her, like, over 30 years to make the decision to finally step out that and, like, learn more about the world and other people. I do think, and this in general comes down to just how we treat people in general when it comes to change. In saying all of that, right? Like, you don't have to forgive her for what she's done. You don't have to forgive her for what she's done. Absolutely not. However, I do think it is important to acknowledge people's growth and their progress in things. I do think it is important to allow people to grow. I don't think we should ever label people permanently as bad people if they show that change is happening. Like, if they are actively demonstrating that they are growing as people, then I don't think they deserve the label of bad and harmful forever. I do think you can get to a point where, like, you no longer have that label anymore. And I'm not saying that she deserves to have that taken off of her right now. I don't know. I didn't watch any of her new content. She has a new book coming out that I don't know what it's about. I don't think she deserves that label removed just yet, but I think that the progress that she has made and the steps that she has made towards being a more accepting person do need to be acknowledged. I think that, you know, it's really unhelpful when we don't let people grow. You know, you see people who have done things in their past that are harmful, and then years later it gets dug out, and then that person is suddenly not viewed in a good light anymore. They are shunned out of society or whatever. And I don't think that that is a productive thing to do if said person has not shown that side of themselves or those traits since that happened, especially if an apology was made, and especially if they make an apology now, you know, like if growth is shown and demonstrated, then I think we should allow for that to happen. I think that we, you know, have all made mistakes in our past at some point, and I think that like you shouldn't be held against for shit you've done that you have learned and grown from, because then no one's going to ever bother to change. I find it so interesting how, you know, we sit here and we talk about like how homophobia is bad and why you shouldn't be homophobic. And then if someone who is homophobic one day realizes, oh, you're right, actually, I don't think it's a problem. I think that, you know, if we then turn around and say, no, I'm sorry, you're not, fuck off. Like, we don't want to look at you. You have no place here. Go die. People aren't going to change their views. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think people need to be forgiven, but I do think that you need to accept growth. I think if someone has said and done harmful things, you never have to forgive them and be friends with them. But I think that they also shouldn't be shunned out of your space entirely. Like, if there are feminists who used to be misogynistic, I think that they are allowed to one day become feminists. Is that not the whole point? Is that not what this is? I don't sit down here to make videos just to have a conversation and talk to people who already agree with everything I say and have everyone regurgitate the same information back to me. I have these conversations because I hope that, you know, as much as I love having conversations with people who agree with me, I would also like for people who disagree to see something in a different light and be like, oh, you know what? That's true, actually. Maybe I should work on that. You know, like we all have to start somewhere. And especially when you're raised in an environment where you are so closed off from the world, you have no one else to learn from. You learn from the people you were around and there's nowhere else. How you need to leave that to be able to grow. And sometimes it takes a really long time. And she did. And she is growing. And I don't think we need to welcome her into our spaces with open arms. Absolutely not. But I think that we do need to acknowledge that growth is there. And like, I don't think it's fair to now crucify her completely and call her like a raging homophobe and say that, you know, she hates gay people because she said so in a book a few years ago, when she's actively shown that she no longer feels that way. And I just don't think it's productive to just ignore growth that has happened. I think that it is important to acknowledge growth. And I think that that gets mixed up a lot of like forgiveness versus acceptance. You can accept people without forgiving them. You never have to forgive someone, but I think that acceptance should come more easily than it does. And yeah, that's, I think, really where we're at. Maybe I'll find out some more information and do another video. Maybe I'll read their next book and then take all of this back and be like, never mind, she hasn't changed at all. I don't know, but this is sort of where we are now. She is a Christian, but her husband is not. She is more accepting and her view on faith is just love. And her and Kristen do not agree on a lot of things now, which I think makes Girl Defined an incredibly interesting place to be. I like that she's like, everyone's saying I'm a feminist now. No, I don't think you're a feminist, Bethany. I don't expect you to ever become a feminist. I don't think you're on my side. I doubt you ever will be. But it doesn't change the fact that I am very happy of the progress that you have made in terms of acceptance and love. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. I upload every few days and I would love to see you again. A massive thank you to my Sprout and Above patrons whose names are up on the screen right now. I appreciate you greatly. Michaela, Natasha, Lady Nutbar, Mr. Noodle, Radsack, Knitting Menace, Samuel, Chris, Elias, Danielle, Eldo, Jessica, Ikazel, Mandy, Josh, and Bobby. And a huge thank you to my Kiwi Cat patrons. I love and appreciate you so much. Thank you so much for joining. If anyone else would like to become a patron, you go to patreon.com/SavvyCat. Click the top link in the description. For as little as £1 a month, you get my videos a day early. And then for £3 and up, you get things such as outtakes, bonus video podcasts, live streams, vlogs, and more. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram, The Queer Kiwi, and Twitter, That Queer Kiwi. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Stay safe. Keep fighting. I love you. Mwah. When you close your eyes.